Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind Inclined. Today, I'm delighted to have my first guest ever. So, David, you're very special. You're my first guest on Mind Inclined. And it's very appropriate, I think, because David is a trainer. He's actually my trainer. And I've known him for, gosh, it's been many years, probably 7, 8 years. And we knew each other professionally, and then we became friends, and we've been in touch. And at one point, I learned that he had become a trainer. And so I asked him to be my trainer. And somehow we've remained friends despite the workouts that he cooks up in his demonic lab for me. Sometimes I hear you cackling in my ears, David, when I'm in the middle of one of these torturous workouts. Anyway, so I'm delighted to have David here. We've talked a bit about what we can learn about diet and exercise, which of course is one of the main themes we often hear about at the beginning of the new year. So I'm going to start by asking David to introduce himself a little bit, and we'll jump right in. So David, tell us a little bit more about your career as a trainer.
You got it. Thanks so much, Mark. And I didn't know I was the inaugural guest, so this is exciting. I'll try not to let you down. Yes, I've been formally a trainer for 3 or 4 years now. I had often just sort of helped my friends with fitness goals and things like that, giving them advice here and there, and realized I really loved that. And I've been seeing personal trainers myself, but I was out on medical leave for quite a while. And so I decided I would make it official and become an actual personal trainer and sort of make your vacation your vocation, as they say. So part-time, I do some personal training, mostly just folks here in my neighborhood. You're my first virtual client, Mark. So there you go. We got first for each other. But yeah, I've always been into fitness, and I've always been interested in forming life habits and doing things to make yourself feel better and feel healthier.
Terrific. Well, it's delightful to have you here, David. And I should mention to our listeners what it's like to have a virtual trainer. So I've been lifting weights almost my entire life. So I don't really need anybody to push me, but I did need some new workouts. And David certainly has come through on that. He's got some brilliant workouts, very different, kind of shaking up the muscles and confusing them. So at the beginning of the year, people are often thinking about diet and exercise. And I know when we talked the other day, I said that 4-letter word diet, and you said, I don't like that word, Mark. So tell us why you don't like the word diet.
I don't love it because I think of diets as temporary. Often you hear people say, I'm on a diet, which eventually means you'll get off the diet if you're on it. And depending on what you read, most diets fail at an astounding rate, from anywhere from like 75% to 95% of all diets fail because they're just not really sustainable long term, especially from a mindset perspective. And so I think that's maybe not the only reason, but it's a big part of it. So I think it's important to think of diets in terms of life changes that are manageable and sustainable. So not something that you can handle for a short burst of time and get that goal you're trying to reach and then just stop, because then you'll be right back where you started. There are diets where people are suddenly going to go entirely without carbs without kind of building up to it. But can you maybe start by removing dinner rolls from your nightly meal? Or, if you have 2 cookies after dinner, just switch to 1. Gradually bring it down to areas where you can feel confident and little successes along the way. And so that's kind of how I think of diets. Is we really want to think of long-term sustainable, so more of a life change or a routine change as opposed to something that's temporary. Does that make sense?
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that could be applied to exercise as well. So talk to us a little bit more about how that idea of permanent change would apply to coming up with a new way of looking at your life in terms of physical activity.
Yeah, absolutely. So with few exceptions, you would be one of them. Exercise is the same way, but I almost never start my clients out full steam ahead with incredibly rigorous workouts, right? Like you said, you've been working out your entire life. So I felt very comfortable after we talked pretty deeply about what your goals were and what I could send your way. And so they are pretty rigorous. But most of my clients come to me wanting to feel better about themselves, lose some weight, be able to play with their kids and not get out of breath. I have senior clients who are like, look, I learned that osteoporosis can be prevented with strength training or resistance training. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So if I were to start these folks out on incredibly intense workouts where they're going from 0 to 60, they would be really sore, probably be dangerous. Muscles wouldn't be ready for it. And you'd feel pretty awful for first 2 to 3 weeks as your body adjusts. And it's a good way to get people to quit, right? So incremental things. And so I start with basic movements. We talk about life changes like walking more, or how they can set up their life to get in a quick workout or things like that. So it's a gradual process with little successes along the way, to kind of build into, habits and make those life changes that are key to reaching goals.
I know we're going to talk more about habits in a little bit, but first let me ask you about this idea of setting yourself up for success. I know we talked about that the other day, and part of that would be not taking on too much, not going from 0 to 60. But are there other little clues you give or tricks you give to your clients to help set them up for success?
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, one of my things is don't give yourself any outs. Don't give yourself any excuses to not do something. So, for instance, I work out almost exclusively in the morning just to try and get it out of the way. So before I go to bed, I make sure my shoes and workout clothes are out and readily accessible to me so I can put them on and get out the door quickly. Saves me sleep too, right? I eliminate the possibility of excuses like I can't find my socks or I'll wake up my wife or whatever the case may be. Everything is right there waiting for me so I can slip into it and be out the door. I've got it clocked, got it down to like 13 minutes. So the idea there is make the thing you want to do easy to do. Make that goal very easy and achievable. Set yourself up for success.
It reminds me of something that David Allen has written. Those of you interested in self-improvement, and that's probably why you're watching. David Allen's the author of Getting Things Done, and he talks about doing things when you're in a clear frame of mind, as you said, putting your keys out the night before instead of waiting until you're in a rush and you're not thinking clearly. So I know doing well in a new goal is a matter of setting what sometimes people call SMART goals. And I know that's important to you when you're training your folks. Do they set up goals in advance or do you kind of ease into them? And if so, what kind of goals do they look like?
I always ask, what is your goal? What do you want to do here? As we said, SMART goals, which are smart, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, right? So if someone comes to me and says, I want to lose 50 pounds, I'm not going to set the goal at 50 pounds, right? We're going to say, okay, the specific goal, part of the S in SMART, let's lose 15 pounds in 3 months by increasing my physical activity. We can measure that. There's the M, and it's a very reasonable time frame in which to achieve the goal. So we would say, okay, you hit your first 15, great. Now you take stock. What worked, what didn't, and then there's also prepping people for the realities of there are going to be plateaus. And a lot of times with weight loss, it will go, be a plateau and then a sudden drop, 5 to 6 pounds, and then steady, 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 and then a drop. So it's preparing people for those mental things that are going to mess with your mind a little bit. Same with strength training. I'm sure you've seen it. You'll make a quick gain. Suddenly you've added 15 pounds to your bench press, whatever. And then suddenly you're plateaued. We have to adjust things, but it's getting people ready for those setbacks. So in those first 3 months, if we're going for the 15-pound example, I'll be saying, hey, we're going to hit that and you're going to see this, and then you might stop and we're going to adjust some things. We're going to keep going. So it's really making those things, like we said, specific and measurable, and then also setting your brain up for success to understand like it's not going to be a linear progression. It's not all going to happen at once. So that when things do come, it's like, no, this was part of the plan. This was how we were envisioning it.
Well, that makes sense. It goes back to setting up for success. If people know it's coming, they're going to be less likely to be discouraged. I
Yes.
suspect, though, that personality plays a role here too. Have you noticed some of your clients? I know you're not going to name any names. I wouldn't want you to, but I suspect that sometimes people are less prepared or less comfortable with those plateaus. And do you have trouble working them through it, or do you try to set them up in advance? How does that work?
Always try to set up in advance and tell them, this is meet yourself where you're at and understand that this is not linear, because and relish the success. Enjoy, like when you do hit those steep drops or those quick gains, from all the training, enjoy that, give yourself the credit, and then acknowledge like, okay, it may stop. I had a client who came in and his goal, he's a young guy, so he wants to get his bench press up higher. That's like his big thing. He came in one day after he had a really good session the week prior, and he got his numbers up and he was feeling good. and he just couldn't hit it. He was just
Mhm.
plateauing. He wasn't able to go nearly as high in weight as he thought. And I was like, how was your sleep? Right? Like, what did you eat yesterday? Were you stagnant? There are all kinds of things. Did you drink enough water today? How are you feeling? All kinds of things can contribute to this. So you could get little setbacks along the way. And it's important to remind people that that's normal and it's going to happen. It's unavoidable. And just to be okay with it, learn to kind of live in that and be okay with that. And then really, like I said, appreciate the gains um, that you do make and the progress you do make. Am I answering your question there?
Yeah, and I love what you said a second ago about sleep, water, what you're eating, nutrition. I think often people who don't immerse themselves in this the way you have don't realize how holistic health is. And so, you read this all the time. Americans don't get enough sleep, and we think we can power through. And I'm no expert in sleep, but what I've gathered from what I've read and heard and my own experience is that you might be get away with that for a day or two, but it's going to catch up with you if you're only getting 5.5, 6 hours of sleep, and your body needs
Yes.
more, and different bodies need different sleep, but typically the number is 7 to 9 hours. And you figure out what works for you. But if you're not getting that, then it's not just the natural plateau, you may not hit that mark and you start getting discouraged, and the temptation will be to slide back, right, and not do the exercise you've been doing. And instead, I think what I'm hearing you say is you try to help people understand that there may be other factors outside of the exercise.
Absolutely. Sleep is huge. And that's what it came out to. He was like, well, I've been up since 3 this morning, a lot on my mind at work and this and that. And I was like, there you go. Like, think about it. Don't just beat yourself up and say, okay, I'll hit it next time. I'll come in when I'm better rested. And I was like, if you're not feeling up for it, that's not the day to try to go heavy, right? Reduce the workload, um, focus on the sleep and try to get to bed earlier, the next night. Get that sleep back if you can. Try to just rest up and put your best self out there. So I felt like, I don't know what, 20, 30 years ago, it was all of these different types of caffeines, coffee and everything, like stuff to keep you going and get your heart rate up and really give you all that energy. And now what do you see advertised all the time are sleep aids, right? So
Right.
I think we did some damage there.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of sleep, we got to come back to habits. You alluded to habits earlier, and I know I'm crazy about habits. I think you're into habits too. What are the role of habits in helping somebody to improve in terms of their health, exercise, and their nutrition? Where do habits come in, and how can they be helpful?
Yeah, so actually, I'm really glad I meant to mention that earlier, with regard to sleep, and then we'll talk about habits as well, or other habits. But the research, and obviously it changes. There's always a change in what we're learning. But recently, what's coming out is that what's most important is consistency of sleep. So if you're getting up at the same time every day, or relatively same time, if you can go to bed at the same time, so your body kind of gets into this rhythm in terms of habit building. I think it's, when something becomes a habit, it becomes non-negotiable. It's a part of you, right? What you're trying to do is figure out, or build something into your life that just doesn't go away, like brushing your teeth, right? Or something like that. It just becomes a part of you, and it really makes it easier for you. Like I said, make your goal as easy as you achievable as in the easiest way possible. So, and it's conscious at first, and then it just sort of becomes that routine, right? I'm curious for your take or how you do it as well. I know you're interviewing me, but you're a very dedicated habitual person. I would love to hear your take as well.
Well, you've made me think about something that I've read in one of my favorite books about productivity and self-improvement. It's called Willpower by Roy Baumeister and John Turney. And Baumeister is a leading psychologist who focuses on willpower. And his take on willpower is that it has to do with actual energy in the brain. And so every time you make a decision, you're depleting your willpower. So you're better off pre-committing, and some of my viewers have seen my video on pre-commitment and on making goals and achieving goals. When you pre-commit, and it's exactly what you're talking about here, David, and I found it's really powerful. If your pre-commitment is, I exercise in the morning, that's not negotiable. Now, it might be hard the first few times you do it, but if it becomes so much a part of your routine, you don't, and you said this, David, you don't think about it, then I think Baumeister would say you're not using up that willpower energy to make the
Huh.
decision, oh, I need to work out now. But also, I think it just goes with your daily routine. I mean, it never even occurs to me, I'm not going to work out today. I just, it's not who I am. And the other thing that comes to mind is one of the habit gurus out there, James Clear, has written a book, Atomic Habits. And my favorite thing in the entire book that he wrote about is it's not so, habit is not so much what you do, it's the identity of who you are. And once you become really committed to eating well or getting enough sleep, it's hard for you to imagine not doing that, because it's like saying, I'm not myself anymore. You and I both are really committed to exercise as part of our identity. And identity, I'm not a psychologist, I'm an English professor, but I do think that identity is really a strong part of our personality. We cling to who we are for whatever reason. And if who we are is somebody who is committed to exercise, to good nutrition, to good sleep, or to being artistic, or whatever that part of your life is, then it's going to be much easier to cling to that identity than to slip away from it. So if you can develop an identity of being someone who is health conscious, or is creative, or is committed to other people, or is always putting other people first, that becomes so much a core of who you are, then you're more likely to cling to that than you are to stray.
Yeah, cling to the identity. I love that. Something else I want to call out here is that it wasn't always this way. Like you and I talk, oh, this part of our identity, you have to build to that. So it wasn't
Yes.
always this easy. And not that it's still not always easy, but when I was a teacher, I was a middle school teacher, I would work out after school. You know, it was nice and early. I got out, I could be at the gym by 3. That was my routine. That was my habit. You know, then I got a wife. I have a kid. I have a different job now. I can't do that. Like, it's just not feasible. So that transition, it was difficult to adjust my thinking and my habits from that 3:30 afternoon workout to 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And so it wasn't something I could just go and automatically do. It was like, all right, instead of getting up at 6:30, now you're going to be getting up at 6 and doing a lighter workout. And then I would move that back. Now it's 5:45. Now it's 5:30. So it took time to build that habit and to transition over to that way of doing things. So not always, so I don't want to talk like, oh, this is super simple to do. There are bumps in the road and there are things you can do to help form those habits. But, you know, don't get discouraged if you're trying to set a new habit and it's difficult at first. There's always a transitional period that can be hard to overcome at first.
I really appreciate what you said there, David. I think you really hit on something important, especially for people who are trying to launch new habits. It doesn't come automatically. And in some cases, you try different things until you figure out what works. So for many years, I taught writing, and I have some strategies that work for me, but I would always say to my students, figure out what works for you. My way may not work for you. It seems obvious when you think about it, but a lot of people try to follow whatever they read in the newspaper, or whatever their next door neighbor's doing. Or if they have a really tough trainer, unlike you, that trainer might say, look, this is the way to do it. But I think you and good trainers would say, figure out what works for you. What's your goal, and how will you make it to that goal? So it's funny what you said about working out after you got off school. I used to be a copy editor a long time ago. And back then I'd get off work 2 or 3 o'clock and I'd go over to the YMCA and I'd do my workout then. That doesn't work for me now. So it may take some trial and error. What happens too often in January is people start and get all fired up. They're going to do this habit, and then it doesn't come together. They become discouraged. And as you said, it drops away.
Well, and yeah, and like like I like to say all the time, you know, and we hear it all the time, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's so important to just stay focused on the goal and not beat yourself up and take that gradual step. I will caveat this with something though. You struck me when you were saying certain things work for you and certain things don't work for you, and everybody's a little different. I mentioned, like, you know, gradual buildups to things, and I feel like I've seen that work a lot for a lot of my clients. However, myself included, it doesn't work for me. I'm much more of a set a hard date. This is the goal. I'm going to immediately transition over to that. And if that works for folks who are listening, know yourself, know what works for you. Be smart, be careful. You know, we have to be gentle to the body as it's adjusting to things. But if that gradual buildup sometimes doesn't work for you and you need just, this is the hard date, that has worked for a few of my clients. It's the majority are much more of the slow transition into habits forming, but some folks prefer the other. So give yourself that grace to do what works for you.
We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Let me just piggyback on something you said a second ago. As I'm thinking about our conversation, I'm thinking about people who may not really be active in developing habits and working on their health. And I can imagine them thinking, saying, David, Mark, you're giving me some mixed signals. On the one hand, you're saying get enough sleep and start habits. And then you're saying do what works for you. And what I would clarify, and you're welcome to disagree with me, of course, is there are certain core principles that generally work for everybody, developing a habit, pre-commitment, and so on. When I talk about doing things a little bit differently, depending on what works for you, I'm talking about kind of methods and around the edges type stuff. Are you better off working out in the morning or working out in the evening? I'm not saying get 3 hours of sleep if that works for you, because chances are your body isn't designed that way. I want to we don't move through the rest of our comments here. We're going to try to wrap this up. I'd love to hear you talk a bit about some inspirational stories. Everybody loves to be inspired, and we need inspiration when we're doing hard things. And you've shared one or two inspirational stories with me. What are one or two things you could share with us that might inspire other people?
One of my clients came to me completely sedentary, basically, like never really worked out, and this is also goes back to setting measurable goals and achievable goals. And so he set his goal for extra calorie burn. You can do it on the Apple, on a Fitbit or whatever device you like to wear, for 650 calories, extra calories burned per day. It's just so, for knowledge sake, generally to keep our bodies alive, we will on average burn 1,500 calories regardless. That's just what it takes to keep us alive, all the systems going, all of that. So he wanted an extra which is 650 on top of that, which as a percentage is a lot. It's over 25% more than what he would be doing regularly, or 33%, sorry. And so I was like, hey, let's set something to more reasonable, right? Let's go. And part of my thinking behind that was, especially with regard to these devices, if you're setting it at 650 right out the gate, and you've only done 200 calories, extra calorie burn on that day, and it says, hey, you've got 450 more to go, that feels like a mountain to climb, not a small hill, right? So I was like, hey, bring it back, bring it to 200, 250, something like that, so that when it gives you that notification, or if you haven't gotten it, you can hit that goal, get that dopamine hit, feel good, feel successful, and take an extra 10-minute walk that you may not have taken, as opposed to, well, shoot, I got to go run a couple miles to hit the goal here. And so then we started, after 3 or 4 weeks, we added another 50 to the goal, and another. And now, he's lost 40 pounds, but it took us a while, and he's lost all this weight, and he's feeling really good. My favorite thing, and perhaps the most inspirational part from that story, was that he came to me and said, hey, I can play with my kids and I don't feel winded anymore. Like, it was awesome, and he said that, his daughters say, go to the gym with David. We want you to throw us more. So I love that. There's also this young man at the gym who he's overweight. He's got a lisp. He's got, things that you think about kids in high school who would probably pick on him, or it might be rough. And I see him at the gym every night when I'm there with clients. He's working out on his own. I try to just give him fist bumps, say, hey man, you're doing great. Like, I saw you last week and you weren't doing that much weight, whatever, just to encourage him. And I feel like we all come up with every excuse to not go. And here's a high school kid who, Lord knows what other, things he could be doing, whatever, socializing with his friends, whatever the case may be. He's made that commitment to himself to go and get stronger, feel better, all of these things. And so I don't know, it touches my heart. I was, maybe it was you, I remarked too, that that's someone I would love to just train for free, help him even get his goals. And it's just inspiring. And I love seeing that and the dedication to it. So thanks for asking about, inspirational folks or stories.
Yeah, I love both of those stories, especially the second one, because it's so easy for all of us. All of us have things we want to do that we don't do. And then you see somebody like that who's doing it against all odds. And, it touches my heart too. It's very inspiring. So are there other things as we wrap up here, something we haven't touched on, do you think would be helpful to people as they're getting into the new year and trying to improve themselves?
Yes. And I'm glad you asked, because, we mentioned Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think The flip side of that is it wasn't destroyed in a day either. And so we've sort of said, hey, setbacks are normal. Um, don't beat yourself if you set that goal and you're on your way towards it and you have a setback, you decide to eat the whole cake or whatever the case may be. It's okay. That's one thing, right? That's one, you just get back on. Don't take that all or nothing approach where, well, I messed up or I had a rough day or whatever, or I didn't go to the gym today because I wasn't feeling quite up to it. It happens. We're human. Like I said, it wasn't built in a day, it wasn't destroyed in a day. So little slip ups aren't the end of your entire goal. Just keep pushing through it, and maybe make those adjustments. But that when we get into that all or nothing think, that can be really detrimental to forming habits and then maintaining your approach to these goals.
Yes, and we'll wrap up on this. I think all of us can easily get discouraged. And when we become discouraged, it becomes an excuse to say, well, this wasn't for me. It's almost as if we're just unconsciously looking for that out. And
Yes.
don't give yourself the out. I would say, think of that kid you're talking about at the gym. He didn't give himself an out. And it would have been very easy for him to say, look, this isn't for me. So when you catch yourself saying, this isn't for me, I wasn't born to do this, think about the people who overcame those obstacles, and you can be that person too.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely, Mark.
Well, thank you for your time, David. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope that people will take some of the advice you provided to heart here. If you'd like to continue to think about ways you can improve your life, you can come back to Mind Incline. That's what we do, helping you to elevate your life and yourself and your world. We're going to be focusing on Benjamin Franklin in January, and he had a lot to say about ways to improve your life. So thank you all for being here. And David, thank you for being here too. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Mark. You too.